I never expected to find God in a military bunk bed, but there it was, leather-bound and worn at the edges, left open like an invitation I didn't know I was waiting for. The pages were dog-eared, yellowed from years of handling, and someone had underlined passages in careful, deliberate strokes. Song of Solomon, chapter 2, verse 3. As an apple tree among the trees of the forest, so is my beloved among the young men. My hands were shaking as I read those words, because I knew whose Bible this was. I knew who had left it there, and I knew, with a certainty that terrified me, that this wasn't an accident. His name was Marcus Chen, and he'd been my bunkmate for 6 weeks at Fort Benning. 6 weeks of trying not to notice the way his jaw tightened when he concentrated on field manuals. 6 weeks of pretending I didn't feel electricity every time our shoulders brushed in the chow line. 6 weeks of lying awake at night, listening to him breathe in the bunk above me, wondering if he could hear my heart pounding through the thin mattress. The military doesn't exactly encourage introspection about these things. You learn quickly to bury what you feel, to channel everything into push-ups and rifle drills and the comfortable numbness of exhaustion. But Marcus made it impossible to stay numb. He had this way of looking at people, really looking, like he could see past all the armor we wrapped ourselves in. During our second week, we'd been assigned to KP duty together, scrubbing industrial-sized pots in the mess hall until our hands were raw. Everyone else treated it like punishment, but Marcus had smiled, actually smiled, and said, "At least we're not getting shot at." Then he'd started humming something under his breath, some melody I didn't recognize but that made the fluorescent lights feel less harsh. I'd asked him what it was, and he'd looked embarrassed, like I'd caught him at something private. "Just something my mom used to sing," he'd said, "when things got hard." That was the first time I'd wanted to touch him, to reach across the soap suds and put my hand on his shoulder and tell him I understood about mothers and hard things and finding small mercies in the worst moments. The Bible had appeared on my bunk after morning PT. We'd run 5 miles in full gear, and I was drenched in sweat, my legs burning, my lungs feeling like they'd been scraped raw. I'd climbed down from the shower, towel around my waist, and there it was, resting on my pillow like someone had placed a live grenade there. Marcus's bunk above mine was empty, his sheets pulled tight in perfect hospital corners. He was meticulous like that, everything in his life ordered and controlled. Except for this. This was chaos. This was vulnerability. This was the most dangerous thing either of us could do. I sat on the edge of my bunk, water still dripping from my hair, and open to the marked pages. He'd underlined more than just that one verse. "Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for your love is better than wine. My beloved is mine, and I am his. You have captivated my heart, my sister, my bride. You have captivated my heart with one glance of your eyes." The passages went on, a trail of ink that told a story more clearly than words ever could. Someone had read these verses over and over, had pressed the pen hard enough to leave impressions on the pages beneath. Someone had been wrestling with something, turning to ancient poetry to make sense of feelings that the modern world said shouldn't exist. I heard boots on the barracks floor, that particular rhythm that meant Marcus was coming back. I should have closed the Bible, should have pretended I'd never seen it, but my hands wouldn't move. He appeared in the doorway, still in his PT uniform, his face unreadable. For a long moment, we just looked at each other. His eyes dropped to the Bible in my hands, to the pages I was holding, and something shifted in his expression. Fear, maybe, or hope, or both. "I forgot that," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "On your bunk." "You didn't forget it," I said. My voice came out rougher than I intended. "You left it open." He didn't deny it. Instead, he moved into the room, closing the door behind him with a quiet click that sounded impossibly loud. The barracks were mostly empty, everyone else still at the showers or the mess hall, but we both knew how thin the walls were, how little privacy we actually had. He climbed up to his bunk, and I thought that was it. Conversation over, moment passed. But then his head appeared over the edge, looking down at me upside down, and there was something raw in his eyes that made my chest tighten. "My grandmother gave me that Bible," he said, "when I enlisted. She told me to read it whenever I felt lost." He paused, swallowing hard. "I've been reading Song of Solomon a lot lately." I didn't know what to say to that. The words felt too big, too heavy, like if I said the wrong thing, something irreparable would shatter. So instead, I asked, why that book? Why not, I don't know, Psalms or something? Marcus was quiet for a long time. Then he said, because it's about desire, real, honest desire. The kind that doesn't apologize for itself. The kind that says, this is what I want, and I'm not ashamed of it. His voice dropped lower. At least, I'm trying not to be ashamed of it. The admission hung between us like smoke. I set the Bible down carefully on my bunk, my hands still trembling slightly. Marcus, You don't have to say anything, he interrupted, but there was a desperate edge to his voice. I just needed you to know. I couldn't keep pretending. Couldn't keep waking up every morning and acting like you were just another soldier, just another guy in the unit. You're not. You haven't been for a long time. I stood up then, moving to the ladder of his bunk. He pulled back slightly, making room, and I climbed up, my heart hammering so hard I was sure he could hear it. The bunk was narrow, barely wide enough for one person, but I sat on the edge anyway, my shoulder pressed against his. Up close, I could see the exhaustion in his face, the shadows under his eyes that suggested he'd been sleeping as poorly as I had. There was a small scar above his left eyebrow that I'd never noticed before, a thin white line that made me wonder about the story behind it. I'm terrified, I told him, because it was the only honest thing I could say. I'm terrified of what this means, of what could happen if anyone found out, of what I've been feeling and trying not to feel. Me too, Marcus said. His hand moved slowly, deliberately, until his fingers brushed against mine. It was the smallest touch, barely anything, but it sent electricity through my entire body. But I'm more terrified of spending the rest of my life pretending, of never knowing what this could be. His fingers interlaced with mine, and we sat there like that, not saying anything, just breathing together in the dim light, filtering through the barracks windows. Outside, I could hear voices, the sounds of the base going about its daily routine, drill sergeants shouting, trucks rumbling past, the distant crack of rifle fire from the range, the whole machinery of military life continuing on, indifferent to the small revolution happening in this cramped space. Tell me something true, Marcus said after a while, something you've never told anyone. I thought about all the truths I'd been hoarding, all the secrets I'd wrapped in layers of silence. When I was 16, I said slowly, I had a friend named David. We spent an entire summer together, just the two of us, hiking and camping and talking about everything. And one night, sitting by a fire, I realized I was in love with him. Completely, devastatingly in love. And I never said anything. He went off to college, met a girl, got married, and I've spent the last 6 years wondering what would have happened if I'd been brave enough to say something. Marcus's grip on my hand tightened. I don't want to be another David, he said. I don't want to be the person you look back on and wonder about. I want to be the person you took a chance on. I turned to look at him then, really look at him, and saw everything I'd been too afraid to acknowledge. The way his eyes held mine with absolute certainty, the slight tremor in his jaw that betrayed his nervousness, the hope written across his face like a prayer. And I thought about that Bible, about ancient poetry, written thousands of years ago by someone who understood desire and longing, and the terror of wanting something you're not supposed to want. I'm taking a chance, I said, and leaned in to kiss him. It was clumsy at first, both of us uncertain, our noses bumping, our breathing uneven. But then something clicked into place, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. His hand came up to cup the back of my neck, and I could feel the calluses on his palm, the strength in his fingers. We kissed like we were trying to make up for lost time, for all the moments we'd held back, for every careful distance we'd maintained. When we finally pulled apart, both of us breathing hard, Marcus rested his forehead against mine. We have to be careful, he said. You know that, right? We can't. This has to stay between us. I know, I said, even though the words felt like ashes in my mouth, because that was the reality we lived in. Don't ask, don't tell might have been repealed, but the military was still the military. There were still rules, spoken and unspoken, still consequences for stepping outside the lines, still 1,000 ways this could go wrong. But for that moment, sitting in his bunk with his hand in mine and the taste of him still on my lips, I didn't care about the consequences. I didn't care about the rules. I cared about the way he looked at me, like I was something precious, something worth risking everything for. I cared about the Bible he'd left open on my bunk, about the verses he'd underlined as a confession he couldn't speak aloud. I cared about the possibility of us, fragile and terrifying and real. The next few weeks were an exercise in restraint. We moved through our days like nothing had changed, maintaining the careful distance expected of soldiers. But everything had changed. Every glance across the mess hall carried weight. Every accidental touch during drills sent electricity up my spine. We developed a language of small gestures, subtle signals that no one else would notice. A certain way of folding his towel meant meet me in the supply closet after lights out. Leaving his canteen on the left side of his bunk meant he needed space, needed time to breathe. It was exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure, this double life we were leading. Late at night, when the barracks were dark and everyone else was asleep, Marcus would climb down from his bunk and slip into mine. We'd lie there pressed together, barely moving, barely breathing, just holding each other in the darkness. He'd trace patterns on my skin with his fingertips, and I'd bury my face in his neck, breathing in the smell of him, memorizing every detail. Sometimes we'd whisper to each other, sharing stories from our childhoods, our fears, our dreams for after the military. He wanted to be a teacher, he told me, high school English. He wanted to be the kind of teacher who actually saw his students, who made them feel less alone. I told him he'd be incredible at that he already was. One night, about 3 weeks after the Bible incident, Marcus pulled out a small notebook from under his pillow. "I've been writing," he said quietly, "trying to make sense of everything. I want to read you something if that's okay." I nodded, and he turned on a tiny book light, the kind you're supposed to use for reading field manuals. In the small circle of light, his face looked young and vulnerable. He opened the notebook to a dog-eared page and began to read. "I never believed in God until I found him in the space between your breaths, in the way you laugh when you think no one's listening, in the courage it takes to hold my hand when the world says we shouldn't exist. If this is sin, then I'll take damnation. If this is wrong, then I don't want to be right, because loving you feels like the first honest thing I've ever done." My throat was tight, eyes burning. "Marcus, I know it's probably terrible," he said quickly, closing the notebook. "I'm not a poet. I just needed to get it out somehow." I took the notebook from his hands and set it aside, then pulled him closer. "It's not terrible. It's perfect. You're perfect." We kissed again, slower this time, deeper. His hands slid under my shirt, and I could feel the calluses on his palms, the careful way he touched me, like I was something that might break. We had to be silent, had to swallow our sounds, but that just made everything more intense. Every sensation amplified, every touch a declaration. We learned each other's bodies in that narrow bunk, in stolen moments between the sleeping and waking world, and it felt like discovery, like coming home. But reality has a way of intruding on even the most carefully guarded secrets. It happened during a field exercise, 8 weeks into whatever we were calling this thing between us. We'd been running maneuvers in the woods, practicing squad tactics, and Marcus and I had been separated into different teams. I'd been watching him from across a clearing, admiring the way he moved, when Sergeant Williams appeared at my shoulder. "You spend a lot of time watching Chen," he said, his voice carefully neutral. My blood ran cold. I forced myself to look away, to focus on the exercise. "Just making sure everyone's in position, Sergeant," I said. Williams was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I've been in the Army for 20 years, son. I've seen a lot of things, and I've learned that sometimes the best thing you can do is be careful, real careful. You understand me?" I understood perfectly. It wasn't acceptance, exactly, but it wasn't condemnation either. It was a warning, given from someone who maybe understood more than he was supposed to. That night, I told Marcus about the conversation. We were in his bunk again, pressed together in the darkness, and I could feel the tension in his body as I spoke. "We need to pull back," he said when I finished. "Put more distance between us during the day. Be more careful." I knew he was right, but the words still hurt. "I don't want to lose this," I said. "Lose you." "You won't," Marcus promised, "but we have to be smart. We have to survive this, both of us." and that means being more careful than we've been. So we pulled back, stopped the lingering glances, stopped finding excuses to work together. It was agony, moving through the days, pretending he was just another soldier, just another face in the unit. But we made it work. We had to. The Bible stayed on my bunk, though. I'd asked Marcus if he wanted it back, but he'd shaken his head. "Keep it," he'd said. "Read it when you need to remember." So I did. I read Song of Solomon over and over, those underlined passages becoming as familiar as my own heartbeat. I read about desire and longing and love that refused to be contained by convention. And I thought about Marcus, about the risk he'd taken in leaving that Bible open for me, about the courage it took to be vulnerable like that. Our time at Fort Benning was coming to an end. We'd be getting our assignments soon, shipping out to different bases, different units. The thought of separation was unbearable, but we both knew it was inevitable. The military doesn't care about what you want. It cares about where you're needed. One night, 2 weeks before graduation, Marcus climbed into my bunk for what might be the last time. We didn't talk about the future. We didn't talk about what would happen when we left this place. We just held each other, memorizing the feeling, trying to make it last. "I love you," Marcus whispered into the darkness. It was the first time either of us had said it out loud. "I know we haven't known each other long, and I know this is complicated and maybe impossible, but I love you." And I needed to say it at least once. My chest felt like it was cracking open. "I love you too," I said. "I think I've loved you since that day in the mess hall, when you started humming your mother's song." We fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, pretending the morning wouldn't come. But morning always comes. We got our assignments. Marcus was being sent to Germany. I was going to North Carolina. Different continents, different lives. We had one last night together before we shipped out, and we spent it not in the barracks, but in a cheap motel off base, the first time we'd ever had real privacy. We made love slowly, carefully, trying to memorize every moment, and afterward, lying tangled in sheets that smelled like detergent in other people's lives, Marcus pulled out his Bible one last time. "I want you to keep this," he said, "so you'll remember, so you'll know that what we had was real." I tried to protest, but he pressed it into my hands. "My grandmother told me to read it when I felt lost, but I'm not lost anymore. You found me, and I want you to have something that matters to me, something that helped me find the courage to leave it open on your bunk that day." We exchanged emails, phone numbers, promises to stay in touch, but we both knew how these things went. Distance has a way of eroding even the strongest connections. The military has a way of consuming your life until there's nothing left for anything else. Still, we promised. We promised to try. That was 3 years ago. 3 years of sporadic emails and occasional phone calls. 3 years of moving through my life with his Bible in my pack, reading those underlined passages and remembering. 3 years of other relationships that never quite worked because they weren't him. I got promoted, served a deployment, learned to live with the hollow space in my chest where he used to be, and I told myself it was enough, that what we'd had was beautiful precisely because it was brief, that some things aren't meant to last. But then, 2 weeks ago, I got an email. Subject line, "Coming home." Marcus had finished his service. He was moving back to the States, to North Carolina, to take a teaching position at a high school about 30 miles from my base. "I know it's been a long time," he wrote. "I know things have changed, but I never stopped thinking about you, never stopped loving you. And if there's any chance, any possibility, that what we had is still there, I want to take it. I want to be brave enough this time to not let you go." I must have read that email 100 times, my hands shaking, my heart racing like I was 18 again and finding his Bible on my bunk. And I thought about courage, about the risk he'd taken all those years ago, about the choice I had now. I'm meeting him tomorrow, at a coffee shop in town, neutral territory, a place where we can talk without the weight of the military pressing down on us. I don't know what will happen. Don't know if 3 years apart is too much to overcome. Don't know if what we had can survive in the real world, outside the pressure cooker of basic training. But I know I have to try. I know I owe it to that scared kid who found an open Bible and chose to be brave. I owe it to Marcus, who trusted me with his vulnerability. And I owe it to myself, to finally stop running from what I want. His Bible is in my bag right now, those passages still underlined, still carrying the weight of everything we were and everything we might still be. And tomorrow when I see him, I'm going to give it back. Not because I don't want it anymore, but because I want to give him something better. I want to give him my answer. I want to give him us, real and lasting and out in the open. No more hiding, no more careful distances. Just two people who found each other in the most unlikely place and refused to let go. Because that's what love is, isn't it? It's choosing courage over fear. It's leaving your heart open on someone else's bunk and hoping they'll understand. It's 3 years of distance and still coming back. It's Song of Solomon in a military barracks and coffee shops in North Carolina and all the ordinary moments in between. And I'm ready, finally, completely ready, to be brave, to be honest, to be his.